This has been highly requested by many of you. Hi guys, my name is G.P.S. and welcome back to my channel. This has been highly requested by many of you. So today I'm finally sharing with you my thoughts on the Hermes Scarf Hanging System, which is one of the many hidden gems that Hermes not only sells in their stores but also uses them. And if you have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, try to remember back to the last time you visited your local Hermes store and saw all their incredible scarves displayed almost as pieces of art, because let's be honest, most of their scarves do look like a piece of art. Well, this is the display system that they used. And even though you see this piece every single time you walk into one of their stores, it's pretty under the radar and not many people are talking about it, but I am today. So if you want to hear my thoughts on this incredible Hermes innovation, then please keep on watching. I tried to film this video right beside my scarf system, but it looked really awkward. So I decided to sit here and then put up as many pictures and as many footage as I possibly can of my whole hanging system, so you get a better understanding of what it actually looks like and what it feels like interacting with it. But let's talk about what this scarf display system is. So it's essentially a mount for your scarves, specifically your silk scarves, to be displayed on your wall. So you can buy this from pretty much any Hermes store. I remember that there was a rumor going around that you could only buy this from Paris, but it is available, I think, pretty much in every single Hermes store. Although there are times when they are a little bit more difficult to come by because obviously I don't think it's really a product that's mass produced, but you should be able to pick these up from any store around the world. And they're essentially this very innovative system that Hermes came up with. So you can hang pieces of their silk collection on your wall. When you pick up one of their sets, you'll get a box like this that comes with 4 screws that go on your wall around your scarf. And then you get 5 of these little strings, which is essentially this metal string that should not look like this because this is actually broken, but I'll move on to that later on. So you get 5 of these little strings, and then you get one of these clou de sel magnets. Clou de sel is essentially one of the most famous patterns that Hermes has. It essentially just says Hermes and then Paris underneath it. It's a pattern that they use on their buttons and on pretty much all of their metal accessories. And then it's magnetized, so it opens up like this. And then within the magnet, there is a little piece of, I'm not sure if it's velvet or a piece of microfiber, but there is a soft piece of fabric. So when you put this onto your scarf, it doesn't actually damage the fabric. So you might be sitting at home thinking, what the hell is he talking about? It sounds so complicated. Why would I need screws? Why would I need magnets? Why would I need strings? So the way it works is, as I mentioned, you get 4 of these screws, and then you're supposed to screw this into your wall wherever you want to display your scarves. And it's actually very easy to put them into your wall. All you really need is something to create a hole in your wall, and then you can easily screw them in there. I personally didn't put these up myself. I had my handyman do it, but I was here when he was doing it, and it didn't take him any longer than, I want to say 10 minutes for measurements and then an additional 5 to 10 minutes to put up these screws. It seemed quite simple and he really didn't need many tools. So as long as you have something to put some holes in your wall, you should be pretty good to go. And what's great about this kit is that if you pick this up, you get this little leaflet that actually gives you the exact measurements of how far you're supposed to put the screws into your wall. You get exact measurements on how far apart they have to be, depending on what size of scarf you want to use. So this system, even though it's produced by Hermes, you can really use it to display whatever scarf you want. You can stick to the traditional Hermes sizing, so you can put up a scarf 90, you can put up a scarf 140, but you can even go to another brand, let's say Louis Vuitton or Dior, who also make beautiful scarves with absolutely stunning art-like prints. And you can do this based on their sizing. Obviously, I'm a huge Hermes fan and I wanted to use this to display my Hermes scarves. So I used the measurements for the Hermes 90 scarf. And this tells you that if you want to put up a 90 centimeter scarf, your screws need to be 105 centimeters from each other. It tells you exactly that you need to measure 105 centimeters on each side of where your scarf is going to be, and then you just put your screws up. And then the other measurements that it gives you is that if you want to put up a 140 scarf, which is obviously a little bit larger, each screw has to be 155 centimeters apart from each other. So it's really much more simple than you would think. Obviously, if you want to put up a different scarf that's not made by Hermes, or if it has different sizing, you have to do the measuring for yourself. But most scarves that I think this system would work with would be quite easy to deal with, considering that more often than not, they're going to be an even square. So this is extremely helpful and makes your life really, really easy. Now, a little tip from me is that my handyman wanted to be safe and he didn't want to put mine really, really close to each other. So he actually left just maybe 1 or 2 centimeters of extra space between the screws. And right now it's making my life a little bit harder, because while it does help me to stretch out the scarf perfectly, it is a little bit more difficult to put up a scarf because you do have to use quite a bit of force to stretch it out. And when you're taking it off, these strings are quite flexible and there is a lot of pressure on these because of that little bit of extra space that my scarf hanging system has. So when I take off a scarf, it sometimes kind of just shoots out because of all the pressure that I put on every single one of them. But the great thing about this system is that pretty much every single part of this is flexible. So the string that you get, the metal string, is flexible. And then there is also a piece of leather attached to the magnet, which means that there is going to be much less pressure put onto the scarf, and most of it will be taken care of by the string and the leather piece. So it should help to keep your scarf in good condition, even if you make a little mistake, as I did here. Mine is a tiny bit more spaced out. I would say that there is about 106 centimeters between each one of the screws. So I would advise you that if you're going to do this yourself, or if you're going to have your handyman do this for you, I would recommend that you err on the side of caution, and by all means you should follow the leaflet and the suggestions of the brand. But if you have the option between 104 centimeters and 106, I personally would rather go for 104 rather than 106, because that centimeter does make quite a bit of a difference. And if you put them closer together, it's going to put less pressure on the strings, on the entire system, as well as the scarves that you decide to put up. So obviously follow this, but my suggestion would be is to always, obviously, again, I have to repeat myself, follow this, but maybe put them a little bit closer together rather than further apart, because it's going to help you in the long run. So what happens once you have everything screwed into the wall? Well, the next step is to take these, which is essentially this metal string that, as I mentioned, is flexible. And honestly, this is what it should look like. You take this and then you essentially open the magnet and you put a magnet to each one of the corners of your scarf. You definitely don't want to put it too close to the edge, because if it's too close to the edge, sometimes it can slip off. So you want to leave quite a bit of space in this kind of negative space where this leather piece is. And then what I usually do is I usually put it onto all 4 corners of the scarf. I put it on a hanger and then I steam it. It's really important that if you take a scarf home from the store, if you bought a brand new scarf or if you have one laying around in your wardrobe, that you steam it, because it's going to obviously have little creases and lines in it where you folded the scarf. And this system is not going to get rid of it. It kind of will pull it out eventually, but it's not going to look as, I would say, refined and as professional. And then once your scarf is steamed, all you're supposed to do is you're supposed to pull this out and then attach it to each one of the screws that has been put up onto your wall, and you're pretty much good to go. It's really as simple as that. You might be wondering why they give you 5 of these magnets and 5 of these strings when there are really only 4 corners to all scarves out there that you're going to put up onto your wall, unless you buy one of the new round scarves from Hermes, which doesn't actually have any corners. But you might be wondering that, and I was thinking the exact same thing. What I found with this system is when I bought it and I put it up on my wall, one of these broke. And I think you could fix it. You could perhaps put a little bit of super glue in there in this string when you push it together, because I can push it together and it kind of clicks and I can feel the click. But as soon as I put any pressure on it, it immediately comes apart. And what's really interesting is Hermes must know this, because they gave you 5 of these. Now, the funny thing is that I bought one of these for a friend of mine and hers also broke. only one of them, the rest of them were completely fine. So it's interesting that Hermes knows that 1 out of 5 of their little creations are going to break, yet they don't improve on them. Instead, they give you an extra one, which is fine, at least they gave you an extra one. But it's kind of odd, and I really have no idea why they do that. I did ask my essay if there's anything she knows about it or what's the reason why they give you 5. And all she could say is that if one broke, I can bring it back into the store. But I didn't want to go through the hassle considering that it's literally mounted onto my wall. I didn't want to take it off and then not have anything up, since only one of them is broke and the rest of them seem to be working just fine. And they have been for the past almost 2 years. So if you're in the same boat, if you have this system and one of your little strings broke, please let me know in the comment section down below. Or if it just happens to be me and my friend, then it's just a coincidence that I happen to purchase both of them, or if this is something that also happened to you. My essay didn't know anything about it, so it might be just a conspiracy that I have, that they give you an extra one because they know it's going to break eventually, but they do. So let's talk about why this is a great innovation and why I think if you love Hermes and if you love their scarves, you need to consider picking one of these up. Obviously, one of the biggest advantages to this scarf system is the fact that it's extremely flexible. So you can really decide what kind of scarf you want to put up depending on your preference and the wall space available to you. You can make it as small or as large as you want to. You can even put up one of the tiny scarves that Hermes has recently just come out with, or you can use it to put up huge shawls and huge scarves. There was a time that I even thought about putting up an Avalon blanket onto my wall, but I have a feeling that this little magnet would not be strong enough to hold the heavier fabric of the wool and cashmere. But a huge advantage that it's extremely flexible, and let's say you move to an apartment or a house that has a bigger wall space, you can make it bigger. If you decide to move it into another room, you can make it smaller. So it's very, very flexible, and it all depends on the scarves that you have available. Obviously, another really important thing is the fact that these have been designed to not damage your scarf in any way. As I mentioned, these are magnetic, and there's also a little bit of a softer fabric on the inside of the magnet to make sure that it doesn't pull on the scarf, and the rest is made of leather, so it's very soft. Even if it rubs against the edges of your scarf, it's not going to fray that. It's going to make sure that it remains in good condition. And this is a question that I got on, I think, pretty much every single of my videos where I showed this system. People were really concerned about the quality of their scarves. They were wondering if it's going to negatively affect the scarf if you put it up on your wall. When you take it off, is it going to be in good condition? Is it going to stretch out? Is it going to change color? All I can tell you is that I've had this system for about just over 2 years, I think, at this point. And I change scarves, I would say every 3 to 6 months, depending on the season and my mood. So overall, I think I've had about 5 to 6 scarves on display, and not one of them was damaged in any shape or form. If I wanted to, I could still wear them as a scarf around my neck and the next day put them back up on my wall. None of them lost their shape, none of them stretched out, even though my scarf hanging system is, as I mentioned, a little bit further apart than it should be. So as long as you follow the instructions that Hermes gives you and you follow their measurements, your scarves should be perfectly fine. And surprisingly, none of these ever leave a mark behind. You honestly could really never see any kind of sign that they were ever used for anything other than just a regular scarf that you would wear around your neck. Another thing I got questions about is discoloration. A lot of people asked if your scarf's discolor when you have it up on your wall, just because of any kind of sunlight that would come in through the window. So my scarf hanging system is placed right across from a huge window. I have floor to ceiling windows in this apartment, and you get sunlight pretty much all day long. Not one of my scarves had any sort of discoloration. I've had up pure white scarves on my wall. Let me show you one here.
I've had this scarf up
for a little while before it got turned into a pillow. And as you guys can see, there is nothing that would imply that it was up on a wall. It didn't get discolored. It was up on my wall for, I would say, about 4 months. During the summer, it was exposed to direct sunlight, and really nothing happened to it. So I really wouldn't be worried about that unless, you have your windows wide open all day long. We know that UV rays can be damaging, especially for your skin. But I really wouldn't be worried. Obviously, if you have a scarf that has a lot of sentimental value to you, maybe something that you got from your parents or a piece that you wore to a special occasion, maybe don't put it up on your wall or use maybe a different method, which I will definitely talk about later on. Another thing that I really enjoyed about this is that it should be relatively easy for you to put scarf on and take scarves off, and it should be really quick. Mine is a little bit more difficult to use, as I mentioned, simply because of the fact that my handyman and I decided to put these screws a little bit further apart. But in the end, I realized that it would have been better if we actually put them closer together. So for me, it can be a little bit more difficult sometimes. But other than that, really all you need to do is take them apart, put them back onto a new scarf, and you can put them right back up after steaming them. Or if you don't want to steam them, you don't have to. I did try to put a scarf up without steaming it, and it did not look good. I would definitely recommend that you steam them beforehand. But putting them up and changing scarves is so incredibly easy. And again, you cannot take away from the fact that it's incredible that this does not damage any one of your scarves. So I really don't think that there are any other alternatives out there that would be so incredibly easy and painless to use. And I just have to emphasize the fact that it does not damage your scarf, and you can have a scarf up on your wall one day, and let's say the next day you decide to wear the scarf around your neck, you can easily go ahead, take it off. It's not going to take you any longer than 5 minutes. You can pull right these off. You can put them onto a new scarf, put that back up, and you're good to go. So I really enjoyed that, and I don't think that any of the other things that you could do with a scarf to use them in a similar manner could compare to this. And as I said earlier, you can really adapt this to use to display whatever scarf you want. You don't necessarily have to use it to display Hermes scarves. If you have a love affair with Louis Vuitton scarves or Dior scarves or silk designer, you can use this to display their scarves. It just really depends on the sizing, because once you have it set up on your wall to a certain size, you're going to have to stick with that unless you completely take it out, fill the holes, and then screw brand new ones. It will kind of restrict you in terms of what size of scarves you can use. But as long as another brand creates scarves in the same size, no one is going to force you to only put an Hermes scarf in the system. Sorry guys if the lighting changed. I had to turn off my ring light because the sun just literally started shining in. So I didn't want the picture to be overexposed. So in case the lighting changed, that's what happened. But I wanted to move on to talk about the different alternatives that you have. In case you like the idea of displaying a scarf on your wall, but you don't necessarily want to invest in this scarf hanging system from Hermes. So I did a lot of research on this about 2.5 years ago before I picked up this scarf system, because I knew I wanted to do something with the wall space behind my couch. I initially wanted to pick up some Hermes wallpaper, but because we're only renting this apartment, I decided not to do that because it just sounded very complicated. And then I thought about putting up a scarf on the wall, and the only two options that I personally found that were really out there, one of them was obviously the Hermes Scarf Hanging System, and then the other one was to take my scarf and have it framed. What I found at the time is that it would have been so much more costly to have a scarf framed, especially a Scarf 90 from Hermes, because most of these, what do you call them, like these disruptive kind of internet companies who make it super easy for you to have things framed. They're kind of the Glossier of the framing industry, where you can just essentially order a box online, you ship into them whatever you want to get framed, and then within a week, a framed picture shows up on your doorstep. Those companies do not create frames big enough to frame a Scarf 90, especially not a Scarf 140 if you want to go to a larger size. So for me, that would have not been an option. The only thing that I could have done is to go to a traditional framing company and then have them frame this for me. But it would have required custom work because they don't make just frames this big. So it would have had to be completely custom, which would have cost me a lot. And also it would have taken away from the flexibility. Once you have a scarf up on your wall, you can not really change that. And more often than not, they'll want to glue it onto a background so it doesn't move, especially if you happen to move with it, or if you, while you're taking it home from the store, they want to make sure that it doesn't move. So some companies will say that they can just use the background to kind of push it against the glass and they feel comfortable with you just taking it home like that. But some companies will want to either stitch it onto something or glue it onto something. And I felt like that it would have been a pain, even if I just used the background to push it against the glass, to keep changing it every time. So maybe if you have one scarf that you love and has a really important meaning and value to you, maybe you can have that framed. But personally, I really don't think that anything can be compared to the scarf hanging system. It might require a little bit more of an initial investment when you pick this up, but you're really not going to regret this long term, especially if you're someone who loves scarves and you pick up a new scarf each season, or you already have an existing extensive scarf collection. This is really a good way of taking advantage of your collectibles, and I just really think it's incredibly fun. I mean, I've had so many people come over and compliment the scarf system because it's so unique. I have such a love for Hermes and everything that they do. Their attention to details, their craftsmanship is honestly like a piece of art, and why would I not want to display that? I'm not someone who would buy into silk scarves because I don't like the look, but this has really allowed me to explore another facet of Hermes, which I think is really important if you love a brand, to try different things that they create and not only stick to one thing and things you know. And I have really been enjoying it. It's been a lot of fun to change around scarves and through that change the mood and the atmosphere in my home. So overall, I'm sure as you guys can tell, I'm a big advocate for this scarf system. I really don't think there are any cons other than the initial investment and the fact that you do have to screw this into your wall. It's not something that you can just stick on and it's going to stay like that. You do physically have to create a wall. Not a wall, but a hole in your wall, which can be a little bit difficult for some people. If you rent an apartment or a home, there might be certain restrictions. But other than that, I think it's pretty easy to use. And as long as you follow the instructions closely, not as I did or my handyman and I did, you should be perfectly fine. And if you're worried about the quality of your scarf or changing color or shape, in the past 2 years, I've had multiple scarves up on display for longer periods of time, and not one of them got misshapen or discolored. I just have to repeat myself. So I really wouldn't be worried about that. And overall, I just find this to be a much better experience than having a scarf framed. And this is it, guys. This completes my video on the Hermes Scarf Hanging System. If you have any questions to me that I didn't answer in this video, then please make sure to leave them in the comment section down below. And if you enjoy this, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you being here and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.